Hi, my name is Christopher Scott from the Biblical Leadership blog at christopherscottblog.com, and I'm continuing my series talking about how to recruit, lead, and keep volunteers. And as part of the lead section of how to lead volunteers, I want to talk about how to use emotional intelligence when leading volunteers. So today's video is going to be just a brief introduction to the topic of emotional intelligence and how you can use emotional intelligence to effectively lead volunteers in a specific way. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to use my notes a little bit more than most of my videos because some of this information is technical and I'll want to make sure I transfer that information to you correctly and not misspeak on anything. So emotional intelligence, it's often called EI or EQ, and it's based on some research that was done about how people can have different ways of learning things and different ways of understanding things, right? So traditionally, we've often learned about and known about IQ, right, which is our intelligence quotient. So there's IQ, which has been something that's existed for a long time, and then EQ, or EI, for emotional intelligence, is something that has been developed starting in the mid-90s, pretty much, with a couple of guys. So what is IQ? Let's first start there. It's the intelligence quotient, and it was measured by two components: a verbal side, which measured verbal comprehension and working memory, and then there was a performance segment that measured perceptual organization and processing speed. Okay, these two elements measure someone's capacity to act purposefully, think rationally, and deal effectively, okay, with issues. And it uses a bell curve to construct an average person at 100, okay? 60% of adult population, 68% of the adult population falls between 85 and 115 on that bell curve, okay? A genius is 140, mentally challenged is 70. So does that make sense? So 70 and below is mentally challenged, 140 and above is genius. Most 68% of people are between 85 and 115. I have never had my IQ checked, just in case you're curious, so I got no clue where I would be on this test. So that's the intelligence quotient. That's the historical background to intelligence, right? However, in the mid-90s, a couple of guys started researching what they called emotional intelligence, okay? The catalyst was probably Howard Gardner's manifesto, which was against IQ, called Frames of Mind. It was actually published in 1983. And Howard Gardner proposed that there was more than just one type of intelligence, okay? And that landed on the idea that great leadership works through the emotions, okay? So Howard Gardner provided several different ways that people learn, not just based on, there's several different ways people can be intelligent, but several different ways people can be intelligent, not just through the IQ method, but other ways, okay? So emotional intelligence is measured by two categories: personal competence and then social competence. And each of the two categories has two subcategories, okay? So under personal competence, this is how we manage ourselves. Personal competence is how I manage myself. It contains self-awareness, which is emotional self-awareness, being able to read your own emotions, recognizing the impact of those emotions, and using gut feelings to guide decisions. It also, self-awareness also includes an accurate self-assessment, which means knowing your strengths and knowing your limits. Self-awareness also includes self-confidence. This is a sense of sound self-worth and a sense of your own capabilities, okay? So under the personal competence, how we manage ourselves, there's self-awareness and then self-management, okay? Self-awareness is knowing what goes on. Self-management is what do I do with what goes on, okay? So we just talked about the self-awareness part. Let's talk about the self-management. As part of self-management, there is emotional self-control, which means keeping disruptive emotions and impulses under control. There's transparency, which is displaying honesty and integrity and showing trustworthiness. There's adaptability, which is flexibility in adapting to changing situations and overcoming obstacles. There's achievement, which is the drive to improve performance as a way to meet inner standards of excellence. Then there's also intuitiveness, which is the readiness to act, okay? And then optimism, seeing the upside of events, okay? So as far as the personal competence area, let's see, make sure I get these. Yeah, personal competence, how we manage ourselves. There's self-awareness and self-management. Then there's social competence, which is how we manage our relationships. And under social competence, there's also self-awareness. Sorry, not self-awareness, social awareness, and then self-management or relationship management. So social awareness and then relationship management that we have here. So under social competence, how we manage ourselves, there's social awareness, and then there's relationship management, okay? And under the social awareness area, we have empathy, which is sensing others' emotions, understanding their perspective, taking an active interest in others and their opinions. Then there's also organizational awareness, which is reading the currents of conversations and people, recognizing decision networks within a company, and noticing politics at the organizational level, okay? Another part of social awareness is service. This is recognizing and meeting the needs of other people, okay? So under social competence, how we manage our relationships, there's social awareness, which we just talked about, and then there's relationship management, which I want to talk about next. Relationship management includes inspirational leadership, which is guiding people and motivating them with a compelling vision. There's influence, which is using the different methods of persuasion. There's developing others, which is improving other people's ability to recognize their own emotions and manage them. And then there's conflict management, which is the ability to solve conflicts that come up. Then there's building bonds and teamwork, collaboration, some others, okay? So that's a little technical definition of emotional intelligence, but it includes personal competence and then social competence, pretty much. So what does it mean to use emotional intelligence as a leader of volunteers, okay? You don't work with people that you have strict control over if you're a leader of volunteers. You have to use, if anything, you have to use more emotional intelligence to effectively lead volunteers than you would have to do if you paid people, right? So that is the important point to recognize. As a leader of volunteers, you got to know and use emotional intelligence. Even if you're not aware of what emotional intelligence is, you probably have used it in the past without even recognizing it. So using emotional awareness as a leader of volunteers means, number one, that you are sensitive to people, okay? You got to understand people, their moods, their situations, things that are going on. You got to understand there's some people you need to always be nice to, even when they do something wrong, or even if they're pushing the envelope a little bit, you need to be nice to them all the time. There's other people you need to be a little more firm with, that they respond to authority. They respond to somebody who will speak their mind clearly and in disagreement, right? It's a sign of respect for them, okay? Another thing you need to do to lead volunteers with emotional intelligence is to be sensitive to situations, okay? You got to know what's going on in the situation. Is it a time of the month where you know this volunteer is always tight on money? So you're going to be a little more graceful in letting them get away with not getting the work done, things like that. Or they're volunteers that you need, situations such as you got some teenage boys that are coming and volunteering, and you got to be strict and firm right up front with them in that situation. Otherwise, if you're not up front, later on you're going to have serious issues when they're getting in trouble and not doing what you say. So additionally, a third thing you need to do to effectively use emotional intelligence to lead volunteers is you need to notice what motivates volunteers, what gets their juices going. Some people, it motivates them to get to work directly with clients. Some people, it motivates them just to get to work with other volunteers. Some volunteers, they're motivated when they get to start and develop a new project or anything like that. So you need to notice what motivates volunteers. The last thing, noticing how volunteers' motivations change over time is another important element of emotional intelligence for leaders of volunteers. So in past videos, I've talked about how volunteers' motives definitely change over time. Research shows that. At the beginning, volunteers want to make a difference in the community and in a specific organization, but over time, volunteers continue to volunteer based on the relationships they make with either clients or staff and volunteers at the nonprofit, if that makes sense. So if you lead volunteers using emotional intelligence, you need to recognize that up front, you need to connect those volunteers to the community and making a difference as much as you can. But over time, you need to kind of shift how you connect their work to their motivations, which would be connecting to clients or to fellow staff and volunteers. So that's a little bit about emotional intelligence. I have a couple stories I sometimes talk about in the workshops that I've taught on how to recruit, lead, and keep volunteers, but we've already went 10 minutes, so I'm going to cut it short here. So again, as a leader of volunteers, you need to use emotional intelligence to understand the situations that are going on, first of all with yourself, to be aware of your own emotions, how those affect you, and to manage those emotions, and then also to be aware in other people and in situations what's going on and how you can manage those situations using emotional intelligence. So my name is Christopher Scott. If you're curious to learn more about leadership and how to recruit, lead, and keep volunteers, you can visit my blog at christopherscottblog.com. I appreciate you tuning in and glad to get to share some of this material with you. Thanks for watching.